Hi everyone, Quiveen here from the comfort of my kitchen. In today's video, we are going to take a look at something that I am fairly confident we will not be able to see here in Ireland. Maybe barely. We will check from the countryside as well. But I saw a newspaper headline, or really the headline of an online journal, saying that there would be a triangle between the Moon, Saturn, and Mars early in the morning of the 14th. And we are seeing at least the Moon and Saturn here. And this is the morning of the 14th, just coming up to 5 o'clock. Just in case, we will head out to the countryside. We'll go all the way to a fully pristine sky and barely from here in Ireland, maybe just barely. Really, with a normal field of view, I don't think so. We'll pull back a little bit more. Human field of view can be quite wide if you include the peripheral vision, but we're not really seeing the triangle between Mars, Saturn, and the Moon. It is only a very narrow crescent moon. If we take a closer look, you can see plenty of Earth shine, which I mentioned in a recent video. If you search my channel for Earth shine, you'll get some information on what it is. But here is the moon, a very narrow crescent with the Sea of Tranquility and what I call the football player on the moon, this collection of seas. They are visible due to the Earth's reflected light, but barely. There's a lot of light coming from the glow of the sunrise here. The ecliptic is passing above the horizon at a very shallow angle, and that's really obscuring Mars and to a degree obscuring Saturn. We can see Saturn here because we've moved into the countryside from a city sky, and we'll go all the way back to straddling between 5 and 6 really. Saturn is barely visible. We can come earlier, but that puts Saturn lower in the sky where it's getting extincted by that extra atmosphere. This occurrence was big enough, is big enough to have received some newspaper headlines. So I can only assume that it's going to look nicer from other locations. In fact, it will definitely look nicer from other locations, but how nice, of course. I don't think Mars, Saturn, and the Moon are particularly close, but what we're going to do is jump down here to southern Spain, southern Portugal. We're still a little bit north of North Africa here, just across the Straits of Gibraltar. I'm hopping down here because this puts us on the same latitude as some big cities in Europe, in the Middle East, and some big cities in China, as well as large cities in the United States, along the top of the United States, places like Washington. Those are roughly at this latitude. And that's certainly all it takes to see Saturn very clearly with the moon. As we move closer to morning time, Saturn is at a good height while the sky is still fairly dark. Our UTC has changed here. We're no longer at the UTC +1 use here in Ireland, which is good. We're off UTC by about 24 minutes. So this is really about 3:30 in the morning UTC. Of course, this view will change depending on where you are on Earth, depending on your longitude, not just your latitude, because that will influence where the moon is for your subjective sunrise. Of course, there isn't really an objective sunrise. Sunrise happens at all times UTC, just different locations on the planet. But we can see that from our longitude here in Ireland, it is a pretty good triangle. It's a bit of a wide, squat triangle maybe, but it definitely looks like a triangle. Let's see how that view changes if we head across the Atlantic. We'll head across the Atlantic first. We'll head over towards the Great Lakes region. So really anywhere around the northeastern United States, you will have a similar view, certain locations in Canada as well. So of course, we're after moving into the nighttime side of the Earth. We have to wait until later for everything to rise. And the moon is now certainly closer to Mars than it is to Saturn, but it's still forming that triangle and we're still getting a reasonable view of Saturn and Mars. Mars here is a little low for viewing in cities unless you've got, a river or a lineup in the grid of streets that gives you a view in this direction. Mars might be tricky, but Saturn is getting reasonably high, so it won't be too difficult to see. We'll hop across to the opposite extreme. We'll go all the way over here into northern China, not as northern as China gets, but northern-ish China, and that's moved us way back into the daytime side. So now we have to come way back towards morning. Let's see when Saturn and Mars pop out. There they go. So now, because we've moved in the opposite direction, we've had to move back in time, the moon is much, much closer to Saturn. It's not a right angle triangle just yet. Not exactly. We're definitely not forming. No, I think it is an oblique angle here that's being formed. But closer to a right angle triangle. In fact, let's hop a little bit further. I do want to keep this on land so that there is a real chance for people to see it rather than, just boats. But this is pretty much a right angle triangle, very nearly a right angle triangle, I would say, from the easternmost coast of Japan. You would get a pretty much right angle triangle, and still on the far southern island of Japan, down towards the Ryukyuan Islands, you would be pretty close to getting this view. But we can go further south. You can, I'm sure, even on this map, see that there is a large deserted portion of the Earth here. Really, these are considered several individual deserts. And although it's difficult to see here, there are some green areas in here, certain areas of the coast of the Caspian Sea here. There are green areas in there. They're just a little bit hard for us to see. But we are going to go a little bit lower, just around Central America, just around where the rainforested grassland section of Africa blends into the Sahel and Sahara further north, just around the bottom, maybe the middle of India, and down here towards, well, it's really the top of maritime Southeast Asia, but around here, still a little north of the equator. And we'll start roughly here, just at the crook of Africa here, just around this area, West Africa. So we are now lower, we're closer to the equator, which should give us a better view if I can line things up correctly. I think we've gone now to the wrong day. We're back to the 13th. So here we go, back on the 14th. Roughly the same amount of triangle that we'd be getting here in Ireland, but as we can see, it's getting much, much higher. So Mars, Saturn, the moon, not only are they all visible, but here's the moon, Mars and Saturn visible in a good level of darkness without Mars being too extincted by the atmosphere. So closer to the equator, we're already getting a much superior view. Of course, it will be a little bit different if we move, we'll just move across to the top of South America here. Again, this is going to put the moon a little bit closer to Mars by the time they come up in the morning. There we go. Again, still rising nice and high above the east because we're so close to the equator. We're going to get the opposite effect, and I will show the opposite effect. We'll come all the way out to the islands here. We'll come all the way out to the Philippines. And that will bring the moon and Saturn closer together. We'll just come back to the right time. And there we go. Again, almost a right angle triangle between Saturn and the moon, almost, with Mars forming that lower tip. We've strayed a little bit from the equator. There's a little bit more of an angle going on here. I don't know if you can see it, but still a very good view. Now we're going to move south of the equator, last stop, because I recently learned that a large number of capitals, Canberra, Cape Town, of course, South Africa has multiple capitals, but we'll just mention one for now. And some of the capitals, for example, of Uruguay over here, they're all at roughly the same latitude. So by showing the view of the sky at this latitude, we're going to cover a large number of people because capital cities, of course, have a large number of people. This is going to make things tilt or appear to tilt in the opposite direction. So here we go. We have Saturn, the moon, and Mars. Again, down in South Africa, we're not at a very different longitude from here in Ireland, just a very different latitude. So we can see here the moon, Saturn, and Mars forming that nice, pretty even triangle. We'll get the exact same effect with the tilt moving in this direction if we shift our perspective. First off, all the way over here to Australia. Not quite so high on Australia. We'll go just a little bit lower. This is close enough. And I say close enough because, of course, this isn't visible here in Ireland, and it wouldn't be visible from very far in the southern hemisphere. But there's not that much land in the southern hemisphere that is as far south as we are far north. So we can see here from Australia, again, the moon much closer to Saturn. Not as close to Saturn, not as much of a right angle triangle as we were seeing from the South Island of Japan. And I'm not sure why, actually. It looks like we should be further over. But of course, this is a rectangular projection of what really is a spherical Earth. So things may be a little bit off. We'll go to just here in South America. This is close enough to the right place. There are several large cities around this area. And again, we are expecting the moon to be closer to Mars on the 14th. And there we go. It is now a little bit closer to Mars than it is to Saturn. This is the view that you would get from that longitude. So all across the Americas, north and south and central, you're going to have the moon a little bit closer to Mars. Way over in the Far East, whether you're up in Japan or down in Australia, you're going to have the moon much, much closer to Saturn. And if you are at roughly Ireland's longitude, but lucky enough to be at the right latitude, then you're going to get closer to that real triangle shape. So I hope some of you in other locations get a chance to see it. For those of you who, like me, do not have the correct viewing conditions, at least you know what it would look like thanks to seeing it here. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do like it. If you like this kind of content, then please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you think others might like this content, then please do share it. You can also read this information on my website, queeveenscontent.ie. Most importantly, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you back here next time.